Welcome to Keep What You Earn, the show for business owners who want to scale profitably and build a business that's actually worth something. My name's Shannon Weinstein, and I run a fractional CFO firm to help seven-figure aesthetics and wellness practices scale with clarity, cash flow, and confidence without burning out or guessing their way into growth. Each week, you'll hear practical CFO insights, real stories about scaling and exiting, and clear financial strategies designed to help you understand what's holding your business back and how to fix it. If you want to follow along with the exact framework that we use with our clients, sign up for the free 5-part video series for aesthetics practice owners, where I walk you through the financial building blocks required to scale your practice and increase enterprise value. You'll find the link in the show notes. Hey, Audrey, great to have you on Keep What You Earn. Welcome.
Thank you, Shannon. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you. Pleasure's all mine. Would you mind just introducing yourself real quick to those listening who may not have heard of you?
Of course. So my name's Audrey Neff. Currently, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Aviva Aesthetics. We have 12 practice locations across the U.S. We'll probably be at 20 to 25 med spa locations by end of year. So we're growing very fast, which is very exciting. But I have been in the industry, the aesthetic and anti-aging and wellness industry, for going on 11 years now, which is crazy to think about. It feels like just yesterday I fell into this industry. So I always joke and tell people, you'll be dragging my dead body out of this industry, because I'm literally never leaving.
It's like that. Let me be clear, your wrinkle-free dead body.
Yes, wrinkle-free, good texture, skin tone, low pigmentation.
Well-hydrated, well-protected, SPF covered.
Yes.
And exactly. Yeah. And I love this industry for that reason. It's just got so many really great people that are so committed to the industry as well, and its evolution, which has been amazing to watch. But I want to talk about, so you've expanded to these locations. Talk to me a little bit about Aviva Aesthetics and how they've been able to accomplish that, because I know so many med spa owners have that single location dilemma, and it's so hard to make that jump into a multi-location, multi-practice. Talk to me about that journey a little bit and where that came from.
Yeah, definitely. And so we're a little different in the realms that we're a platform, but we're not your typical private equity backed platform by any means. So, and we've all, unless you live under a rock in this space, we all know that consolidation has started. The majority of the industry is still unconsolidated, but the consolidation will continue. And so private equity and the investment community has been watching medical aesthetics for quite some time, started making their moves into this space and acquiring businesses, a couple of years ago, and it's been accelerating ever since. So if we take a look at the, traditional private equity roll up, typically med spas are selling for, let's call it 3 to 6x of whatever their EBITDA is. Multiples used to be a lot higher a couple of years ago. They've definitely kind of, regulated out a little bit now. Yeah. So, and obviously there's nuances to that, depending if you have, millions and millions of dollars in EBITDA, that your multiple may look a little bit different, but you're typically not going to see anything double digit. Very rarely would you. So essentially what private equity is doing is they're buying everyone's business at a relatively low single digit multiple on their EBITDA. You sell the majority of your business, you have a little bit of rollover equity, maybe it's 10 to 30%. And then private equity platforms are going to be going to mid-market private equity in 3 to 5 years to resell the platform at a platform multiple. And if we think of platform multiples, it's mid-teens to 20 times plus. And so if you look at that model, it's the reason Aviva was born is because we wanted to bring a model to the industry of what if we can do something similar, except the people that actually build the successful businesses and create all the value keep the majority of that multiple expansion upside instead of private equity. So Aviva Aesthetics, we're the only platform that employs an entrepreneur equity model. It's trademarked. We successfully already have employed this in the oral surgery industry and had a transaction in June, around 36 locations. The company was valued at over $500 million in less than 5 years. So we're doing the same thing in aesthetics. So the majority of our platform is owned by med spa owners instead of private equity. So practices join. It's a true partnership model where all of our locations still retain full equity in their practice. It's just tracked in a different way. And then, we have Aviva as our MSO, our wraparound management services organization that provides business support, financial support, marketing support, operations support, you name it. And we help optimize EBITDA. So anyone who joins, we have financial criteria, of course, but anyone who joins Aviva are passionate practice owners that have built a great business, but they don't want to sell today, but they want to have an exit strategy in the near future. So what we're really doing is partnering with practices. They're able to unlock economies of scale and back office support. And then when we bring on an investor partner as a group, because everyone operates under the Aviva MSO, that multiple expansion upside, let's just say it's 15x to be conservative, 90% of that goes to every single med spa owner based on their own EBITDA. So it's like life-changing money for everyone. When we do financial analyses, it's really cool to have people sometimes we have people in tears that are looking at this because they just never thought that, they would have an opportunity like this before. So we're ruffling the feathers a bit, if you will, which has been very fun. And I like to be a part of things that are truly disrupting the status quo, which is what we're doing. So it's a very different platform that hasn't existed before in aesthetics, but that's what we're doing at Aviva.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And so if I had to maybe draw an analogy, tell me if I'm accurate here. It's kind of like when you're thinking of selling your house. Maybe you're not putting it on the market today, but you're hiring someone in to come and stage it, take the photos, optimize it, cover a punch list, get a home inspector in and just be like, how good is this going to look to a buyer? Have you cleaned out all the cabinets? Have you cleaned off the cobwebs? Does it not? Can we take that mural off the wall and like that giant poster that very much screams you? Maybe change the paint color a little bit to make it nice for company to come over. That sounds like a little bit of what some of this private equity and what Aviva might be doing is saying like, hey, we'll help you out. You may not want to sell it tomorrow, but we'll help come in and optimize it so that a buyer will look at this and go, ooh, that looks nice.
Exactly. That's exactly what we're doing. So
love it.
Great analogy.
And that's always what I say. Yeah, that's always what I say is if you're building, just like you are with your house, if you're keeping your home, welcome to anybody else, company or a buyer or whatever, when that opportunity knocks, you'll be ready. And that's the beauty of it is when you have a partner that does that is what's the downside? You're always ready for an opportunity, whether or not you want to take it now or not. You don't have to, right? You don't have to sell today, but gosh, if you're attractive to a buyer today, gives you a lot of choices because a lot can change in your life, a lot can change in circumstances, and you don't want to wait until you're just aching to sell. Chances are, if you're aching to sell, you're already kind of starting to slope and you're starting to like let go of certain things and your valuation won't be the same, right?
Yep. And if you're aching to sell and you really want to sell, you don't have the upper hand.
No.
And so it's you always want to be in a place of leverage and a place of power and not have that flipped.
Exactly. Which is why you have to be thinking a little bit more long-term as a practice owner, because even if you're not ready today, you have to be thinking about the future. And I even use this analogy because it's kind of a taste of their own medicine, but I tell my practice owners, how many of you wish that in your 20s you wore more sunscreen? And you thought about that. You thought about the long-term effects of stuff and you had these small, albeit very small, tiny habits that if just done consistently in the early stage could have just saved you so much in treatments later down the line. People do that with their business, right? What are some of the things that you have seen that can either help or hinder the viability of a practice's value? Like what are the little things that could maybe crush your value or really make or break you?
This could be answered in many, many different ways. So we'll unpack kind of the biggest things that I see. And between myself and my colleague, Tyler, who's our CEO, I mean, we do financial analyses every single week, and they are very detailed, deep dives into practices financials. So we see a lot, if you will. And I will say some of the biggest things that I see just from the P&L when we do, because obviously when someone has their P&L as it sits today, that's typically not how an investor would look at that. There's going to be add backs and adjustments and things like that to get
normalizing and all that. Yep.
Right. So when we actually do all of that work and then we have what the true P&L actually looks like after adjustments and things like that, I will say some of the biggest things I see are just inefficient expenses. So too high of facilities costs, too high of payroll, too high of Marketing sometimes, but marketing I think is really just people not having the right people, processes, and tools in the practice to effectively convert leads and effectively have a good consultation process. So I would say too high of clinical costs, too high of payroll costs, and too high of facility costs are typically three very common mistakes that we see. On the facilities cost alone, something that I have been seeing so often are people opening up second locations when they shouldn't be opening up a second location.
Amen. Amen. To the premature second location.
Mm-hmm. And people do it, and people do it. And honestly, I think there are two sets of people in this world. There are people that operate off IQ and EQ. And on the EQ side, people think it looks cool to have a second location. I want to have a second location because I want to tell people I have a second location, or I want to have 5 locations, whatever. And so they get into it emotionally and not actually looking at, is this a wise thing to do for my business? Looking at my KPIs, my financials, my capacity of my providers, my revenue, like all of these things. And then all of a sudden you open up a second location. Now you have rent. Now you have payroll. Now you have additional expenses. And all of those things do is just drag down your EBITDA. And it's interesting because recently, some of the multi-location practices that we've done financial analyses for, some are in a great spot, some are not in a great spot. And the sad thing about this is if you just pulled that second location out or hypothetically close that second location, that business would actually be a great business from an EBITDA margin standpoint. So I think in a lot of cases, you're better off if you want to truly build a valuable asset. And I preach this to everyone, is operate your business today as if it were for sale. Even if it's not, it's a good thing to do as a business person, just operating as if you're selling your practice. Obviously, if you're starting out, that's going to be different because you have, you got to start building your team and diversifying.
Build it the way you would possibly build it with that in mind, right? And knowing that the decisions I make today are going to shape my ability to do that in the future, and know the impact of that, right?
Definitely. 100%.
Yeah.
So,
and it's this idea of volume over value, that more is better by simply multiplying the locations. It's a status symbol. It's a vanity thing. It's whatever. But at the end of the day, you're multiplying something that doesn't work, doesn't make it better. It's not going to fix location 1's problems by having location 2. It's just going to multiply them and reveal them in a bigger light because it's going to drain cash flow. I think it's almost like you forget. I call it the second kid. When you oh, let's have a second kid. And then you forget the first couple months when you don't have sleep. And then you're like, why did I do that to myself again? You're grateful for it. But at the same time, you go, oh yeah, that part. I kind of didn't think about that part. I thought about all the good stuff. And then I didn't think about that's going to kind of suck for a little bit. My bank account's going to be drained, and I don't think people quite realize. They realize that I had a successful first location doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a second successful location. You have to have the program in place and the repeatable processes. Just because you roll the dice once doesn't mean you'll roll it again, type of attitude. And I think people they absorb their success as, oh, I must have done all this right and I can do it again right. And sometimes there's some stuff outside of you that made it work. Your second location may be in a different area with different clientele and your marketing doesn't work there. Little things like that. One of the biggest questions that we get as CFOs is, when am I ready to expand? When am I ready to exit? Unfortunately, it is a complicated question, but the answer can be simplified into a framework that we've developed that helps identify the 5 financial vital signs that are indicating if you're ready for expansion into new locations or possibly an exit. You can find the link to the video series in the show notes that walks you through the simplified framework and helps you identify the biggest thing in your way to those goals.
Yeah. And to build on that too, going back to just opening up another case, people should only be opening up a second location if your providers at location 1 are at capacity, right?
Yes.
So if your providers are at 40% capacity,
no,
you shouldn't
80% or higher easily.
Yes,
you have to be over 80% capacity met and have a good revenue per square foot in that space. Use your rooms well, right? You can't be, you can't do that.
Yeah. And then also having systems and processes. You can't and people everyone's annoyed at their technology. Everybody hates their EMR. They don't want to add other things on. But the way you need to think about it is to create something that is scalable. You need technology, you need systems, you need processes, you need all of these things to plug into your business so that it can operate seamlessly and smoothly, and you can implement things that are repeatable in nature, right? Because if you can't do that, you can't scale. And so, I mean, there are still practices out there that are using paper charts and don't have electronic medical records or a practice management system. So, I think people just need to think about is what are ways where I can create repeatable processes that can then be replicated in the same way in another location if my location one is at capacity and financially a very healthy business.
Yeah, and you have to prove those things, right? To prove they work, and then you have to be firm in keeping that structure. Because what I see a lot of is providers who come in, who work and then are a little bit demanding and a little bit like, well, I want to make this much money and I need to make this much salary and I need to do this and that and make this much commission off of the treatments. And it's like, this is our program. This is how everybody gets paid. This is how it works. Because I just see a lot of this kind of caving to, oh, well, in order to keep all these people, I had to bleed out this much in commission and this much in that. And anytime someone talks to a patient, they basically get a commission now because of how the layering works and how complex it is. I think that's also one of the kind of weird deal killers because it affects profit is like really overcomplicating your comp.
Yes. Overcomplicating comp, overpaying injectors, right? Like when you look at, because when we even look at payroll and stuff, I mean, typically what someone is generating, they should be making around 20%, give or take, of what they're actually bringing into the business.
Yeah, they bring in $5.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think people I think in some cases there has become obviously there are really hardworking people out there as well, but there's also a lot of entitled people out there that demand things. They think they should be getting paid XYZ because they have whatever it is, a social media presence and things like that. But if they're not generating that for your business and financially, it's not at that range, they're probably going to be a toxic employee and you should probably get rid of them. So I mean, managing people is another big problem. And something else that builds a really valuable, sustainable business is having a team that actually stays with you and are culturally aligned in your vision and your mission. And they operate day in and day out aligned with your core values. And while these things are a little bit more conceptual in nature in some cases, the majority of med spas, and I travel all the time, probably more than I should, but I ask people all the time, how many people in this room have a freaking mission statement and core values? And like very few people have them. And these are like guiding principles that you need to have in your business so that you can, it's almost like the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. And, you need the right people in the right seats before you know where the bus is going. And that's how everyone should be operating their business, not just hiring people here and there. If someone's toxic, they keep them because they're bringing in revenue, not having core values, not having all these things that are truly the foundational structure of your business. And then once you have those, it needs to be implemented into your hiring process, your firing process, so that you're actually aligning with the right people who should be in your practice to create something that is sustainable in the future.
Yeah. And if you're keeping those toxic people, other people see that. And then they know what you're tolerating. And then everyone will go to the level you tolerate.
Yes.
That is the thing. It drags everyone else down through the toleration of anything below excellence. Everyone will be dragged down below excellence. So if you want to have a practice that exudes excellence on all levels, you have to expect that standard and not tolerate beneath it. I've just seen so many people just kind of go, oh, but it's like so much easier than hiring someone new to just keep this person. And they go with what's like convenient in the short term, easy for them, but like really not good for the business.
Yep. I agree. People just bury their heads in the sand, and it's like they're just operating for tomorrow.
It's not their fault. I don't think it's intentional, right? I think it's the fact that almost every med spa owner I've ever met is typically a provider who went off on their own and they're a practitioner. They have a passion for what they do, for the art and the service of what they do. And at the end of the day, what they don't realize is that when you open your own business, you are no longer an injector. You are no longer a laser tech. You are no longer a doctor. You are now a people manager and an HR representative. That is your new job. You happen to run a med spa, but you are a business owner as your job description. You are no longer a medical professional first and foremost. And that is very difficult of an identity shift, because I think that's really where it hinges, is you have to re-identify as, I run this business. I am the CEO, the president, the founder of Aviva or whatever. And then I am not Dr. Shannon or Dr. Audrey. Like, I am now the owner of this business. That is the shift, because I think that too many people are still operating from that. Like, I am the practitioner who happens to be the owner because it's cool.
Yep. I totally agree. And to build on that even more, and that's such a great point, is because the majority, just like you said, the majority of owners in this industry are providers. And so if you're providing the majority of the time, like 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, whatever it is, that leaves minimal time to also work on your business and on managing your team and on implementing and retaining top talent, on creating, I always call the drink the Kool-Aid culture, which is corny, but it's true. Like, everyone needs to be drinking the same Kool-Aid at the end of the day. And so in my experience of some of the most successful practices that are both a part of Aviva and outside of Aviva, just good friends that I have in the industry, is the people that have really, because it's like med spas go and then they hit that 1.5, maybe 2 million mark, and then they start to struggle, right? Because it's typically that it's like this crossroads. Okay, if I'm producing all of this revenue, but if I want to get to $3 million, $4 million, 5, 6, 7, you need to actually start removing yourself, not completely from providing, and put yourself more in a CEO position, right? And put a CEO hat on, where you actually have a lot more time to build your business and manage your team and train people so that you don't need to be in your business providing day in and day out for it to run. Like, if you can leave your business for a month and your practice still operates just fine, that's when you know you've built a really, really successful business as well. And so I think people just struggle with that. And it's totally fine, because a lot of, just like you said, people got into this industry because they just want to like make people feel happy and confident and change people's lives. Like, it's one of the most amazing industries in the entire world. And I have the utmost respect for every single injector or provider that moved out of the hospital or moved out of primary care and decided that they wanted to make a big change, open up their own business to make people happy and confident and change lives. But then they're thrown into this world of entrepreneurship and they hang that shingle up and everything changes. So I think people management, being a true leader, like, true leaders create other leaders as well. So when you're building your team, think about what are some ways that I can create other leaders in my practice. So for instance, creating a lead nurse injector that can actually onboard and train new employees, so you don't have to do that. And that perhaps they get a little bonus for every new employee, new injector that they onboard and train. Because now they're incentivized to do that, but now you're not bogged down doing all of these things, right? So I think delegating is something that a lot of people struggle with, and that's totally okay. But I think when we start thinking about how to create something that's sustainable and could be a valuable asset one day in the future, you do need to start delegating tasks to other people.
Or at least designing the tasks that are delegatable. So if you're going to be doing it, leave that trail of breadcrumbs of what you do, how you do it, your recipe for your secret sauce, right? Because everybody treats it like it's this special snowflake process you follow. Like, oh, it's so hard for me to teach how I do it my way. And hey, I've done that too. I've been like that since I started my business, where there's like the certain things where I go, it's kind of hard to bottle this up. I'm going to try to write this down. And what the people have to realize too is that you have to ask your employees to do this too, to preserve their processes so that they can train others, and there can be like multiple people who can have coverage, because like those no-shows are really no fun and all of that. But what's hard is doing that and maintaining a culture where that doesn't create fear of job security, where it's like, I need you to train these people on what you do. And it's like, you really don't want to infuse that in either. You have to make sure that it's all in the name of, we're doing this for a better process and more consistency in how we deliver to our patients, not to feed egos. And that's the big thing about delegating, is that you've got to let go of the ego that like you're so special, only you can do this. That is one thing that will just kill your business.
Yes. Right. I 100% agree. I 100% agree. And also like just on the culture thing, like people need to feel like they're a part of something bigger. And so whether it's like weekly team meetings every Monday, every Friday, everybody gets together and we talk about the week ahead, everything that happened this week. If we had challenging patients, whatever it is, or maybe there's a different training theme that we do every week, but like spending that time, like the level 10 meetings are great, like the EOS and things like that. So, just something that it creates structure of, okay, these are our goals for the quarter. These are our issues. These are the rocks. Like what are like, cause structure, it is very, very helpful so that everyone is aligned on, okay, so these are the goals. This is what I should be doing. These are the issues that we're having. What are things that need to be done today? What are things that need to be done over the next 6 months? And just making sure that your team is aligned. So often I feel like practice owners don't even really involve their team in what is going on in the business. And so it's like everyone is siloed on their own island and they don't know what the goals are. They don't know what's going on in the practice. They don't know how much revenue that we're trying to hit collectively as a team and what individual revenue goals should be. So I think just collectively bringing your people together and making it feel like everyone is a part of something bigger than just their own individual role is something that's really, really important as well.
No, that's huge. And it creates that cohesion though of the brand and of the product that is your business, because then if somebody comes in on an acquisition, they know what they're getting. It's a complete package. It's not a collage of different opinions. It's not an inconsistent cool mosaic, if you will, of all these different things going on, different processes, different methods, different personalities. You want diversity 100%, but you want to also have a cohesive culture and messaging where everybody who picks up the phone maybe says the same thing, where every treatment goes through the same structured process of like the welcome, the this, the that, the closure, the rebooking. Like you got to go through kind of a more structure. And that doesn't, I feel like people will say, oh, that stifles like the creativity and the personality and the customization. It's like, no, it's just a framework. We got to have frameworks that people follow and infuse your own special sauce in between. Like be the provider you're designed to be, but follow the model. And you also have to be willing to discipline and enforce that model. And I think that's really where people struggle to our point before is like, they just want to avoid the conflict and they can't stand the like constant recruiting turnover and having to be that people manager that I feel like people didn't sign up for. A lot of times they don't realize they signed up to be a leader and a people manager first and foremost that happens to work in a med spa.
Yeah. 100%. Going back to what you said too about like answering the phone the same way, like to create a brand and everyone thinks that they have a unique brand. You know, I ask this all the time, like, how many of you guys think you have a unique brand? And everyone raises their hand. And it's like, okay, if I were to ask you, like, if I were to come into your practice on Monday morning and take every single person on your team, whether it's 5 or 50 into a separate room and ask them each individually, like, what is your practice's unique selling proposition or what is your brand? Would everyone say the same thing? And typically it's like, oh, no, they wouldn't. So from a continuity perspective, to truly build a brand, you have to have that continuity of care. So just like you said, answering the phone, greeting every patient that comes in. Do you escort them to the treatment room? Do you carry their purse? How do you check them out? Like everyone should be doing these things in the same way. While everyone is going to have, different personalities and the way that they talk to patients and things like that, to truly build a brand, there has to be that continuity. So I think that that's something that a lot of people don't typically think about. Some do, but yeah.
No, but also I want to strip it all the way back to the patient experience, the customer experience, because that continuity and consistency builds trust.
Yep.
And hey guys, you work in medical aesthetics, you are selling trust because people are allowing you to take pointy objects to their face. They need to trust you. And honestly, that's the distinguishing factor. And like as a customer, as a, person who goes to these places and works with a lot of med spas, I go, somebody has to trust you. That first injection, that first time they visit, they've got to have a level of trust with you. And you have to establish that. And you enhance it through consistent behavior, even in the micro, because it's like, no, I trust this person. They know how to deal with it. They were really good. They have the same experience, and that you're not rolling the dice every time you come in and you see a new person. It doesn't make you nervous because you're going to get that consistent experience. It's fundamental. And there has to be that level of trust with your patients for them to trust you, because that's really why they come back to you. Because sorry to break it to you guys, but most cities in America, you have a lot of competition. You know this, right? And they come back to you for that reason. And that's where like unique brand is one thing, your social media is one thing. It's just like, how do you build trust with your patients?
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because if we think about aesthetics, it's a commoditized market. Just like you said, competition is, you can throw a rock and hit a med spa on most corner. Yes. 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 Amen to that. Yes. Hmm. Yep, I totally agree. And building on that too, if essentially everybody's offering the same products, services, devices, injectables, those things are the same. So if those things are the same, whether you go to Joe Schmo down the road or Med Spa A next door, what do you do to differentiate yourself beyond that? And the only way that you can differentiate beyond that is just like you said, patient experience, clinical expertise. What is your unique approach to aesthetic medicine, longevity medicine, whatever that may be, and building perceived value, right? And perceived value, if we think about this, it's the perceived benefit has to outweigh what the cost is. And that perceived benefit of why somebody receives an aesthetic treatment or follows through with some type of 6-12 month treatment plan is because it's emotional. Like people buy an emotion and then they justify with logic. So they have to believe, based on the trust that you are building with them, that they believe that if they do this treatment or they complete this treatment plan, they're going to feel so much better about themselves. They'll be more confident. Because of that, they'll perform better in all aspects of life. And then if all of those emotions outweigh what the cost is, that's perceived value. And people will typically say yes to that. So I think people just really need to also come back to the basics and understand that. And every injector would agree with this, but it's a very personal industry. It's a very relationship driven industry. And people are at the forefront of everything. Like, it's just, what are little things that you can do to build better and stronger relationships with every single patient who walks through that door, whether it's keeping, little notes in your EMR platform, even if you don't remember the patient. But after Susan left, she got a new puppy, she's planning her wedding. You put those little notes in there. It takes 2 seconds. So when Susan comes back, she doesn't need to know that you don't remember her. You walk in the room and it's like, Susan, oh my gosh, it's so great to see you. How is your puppy? How is the wedding planning? And all of these little things that take very minimal effort on the practice side of things, like whoever it is, the injector, provider, owner, but they have such a massive impact on the patient side of things. And then training your team that this is what we do in the practice, because we want to create an experience that is memorable and where people are coming to us based on value and what we bring to the table and not on price.
Exactly. And you hit the nail on the head where it's the patient or customer perception of it, that like, if somebody did that to me and remembered, I'd be like, oh my gosh, like that's wow. And I would remember that. And then I would go tell people, you're not going to believe this. Audrey remembered that I was wedding planning. I haven't seen her in 3 months. And like, she asked me how the wedding planning was going, and my wedding's in like 3 weeks. And it's like, wow, like she remembered. And you take the time to do that, even if it's just a quick note. Lord knows, I know you haven't been thinking about me for the last 3 months and wondering how it's been going, but like just asking that is like, wow, they really take an interest in it and make me feel at ease, because now it's back to how I'm doing, what's going on with me. And it just gives a lot of comfort to that. It's so true. And it's such little things you can do that make a big impact. And I think that's what people miss a lot, is they're trying to do too much, or they're trying to, like, even just these little processes, they try to over engineer it. They think that like, oh, to make these like SOPs and processes, I have to have an entire manual that's 250 pages long on every scenario and how to script everything. And I'm like, actually, you don't. You really just need guiding principles, to your point, and understand the mission and the values. What behaviors contribute to this? What behaviors don't? And how do we want our patients to feel walking out, coming in? If you guys all agree on that, it's pretty simple from there on out to implement. But a lot of people over engineer it or don't do any of it and kind of leave it to chance,
Yeah. Or a lot of people just like they mentally get so stressed out about thinking about doing these things. And so they just keep pushing it off while they are overcomplicating it. Just like you said, you don't need this giant 250 manual book of SOPs. It's like, oh, I'll do it next week. I'll do it next week. I'll do it next month. I'll do it next month. And it's almost like I talk about it a lot of the lectures I teach, but the tyranny of the urgent concept, it's by, I think, Charles Hummel, but there's like the 4 quadrants essentially. And you have like non-urgent things that are, or non-important things that are urgent things that are not important. I forget what the other one is, but then there's that one quadrant. I think it's like quadrant 3 or 4, and it's non-urgent things that are the most important. So once again, it's like vision, mission, process improvement, clarifying values, team development. And they're the things that often get put on the back burner all the time, but it's that quadrant that impacts the most out of your entire business. And unfortunately, it's the other 3 quadrants the majority of people spend the time in, not that one quadrant.
It's kind of like, going in for all of your skin treatments, but your diet's shit. Where it's like treat the inside and the outside will serve you. And it won't be screaming at you for hydration treatments or anything because you're drinking enough water. Your business needs to have the good like nutrients in it like this to avoid topical treatment later that's screaming at you because of urgency. And that's what we always try to preach is the like, well, what's good for the business fundamentally, internally, that's going to then surface. It's going to show up on the surface later and solve the other problems. The actual urgent problems, believe it or not, are mostly treated by the important, because you've got like drama, you've got turnover, you've got injectors that are giving attitude, want more pay, blah, blah, blah. But fundamentally, if the culture, the values, the expectations are super clear and they're said from day one at onboarding, this is what's expected of you, this is how we structure it, and that's what they enroll into, then the rest is really going to be minimized because there's less confusion, miscommunication, and all of that down the road. But people are just treating the symptoms that come later, not the actual root.
Yeah, people aren't proactive, right? You have to think ahead. You can't just be reactive in business. You need to be proactive.
Yeah. And we can say that all day, right? But people don't behave that way because we respond to the urgent, because we respond to the adrenaline of, I need to deal with this now because this is on fire. Instead of, turning off the stove, we just fight the flame that keeps popping up. And it's like, this is all coming from a deeper place. But going back to like, all of this does contribute though. When we think about like enterprise value, which we talk about a lot on the show and I talk about a lot, is enterprise value is something else that gets lost in translation because we're dealing with the surface level profits, the surface level cash flow, all of the things that are on the day-to-day experience of the owner, but we lose sight of what actually builds enterprise value beneath the surface. And a lot of that I call the risk management side of it, because there's the performance side of it, which is like, I'm chasing my numbers, my metrics, whatever, that's measurable. But what a lot of people struggle with is you can be completely consumed. You can have a great profit, great cash flow, all the things to your point, but you're the main provider, but you've got no SOPs, but you're living in a Google Sheet empire of numbers. You're dealing with paper instead of EMR. Talk to me about like, we talked about a little bit of financial performance piece, but let's go into like, how do you look at risks that maybe are not as measurable that do impact the multiple?
Yeah. And this is a great topic to go into, because when we think about building enterprise value, it's about risk. It's what can you do to de-risk your business as much as possible while having very predictive cash flow. Because when investors come in and they buy an asset, they want the asset to be as de-risked as possible. And they're also buying consistent cash flow. Where if Susan unfortunately gets very sick one day and she's out for 6 months or 12 months, is that going to dramatically impact your business? And so from that aspect, provide diversity and having service diversification is very, very important in your business. So if you're super heavy on injectables, your margins are typically going to be worse because your clinical costs are going to be higher. But if you have a good mix of injectables and energy-based devices and other services where your margins are a little bit better, now your margins are going to come up a little bit. So I think from building an enterprise value standpoint, how providers and owners should be thinking about it is, okay, what can I do to diversify my business as much as possible, both from a service mix perspective and a provider mix perspective? Because if you're the only one generating revenue and then something happens to you, your business is gone. And so it really doesn't matter how much top line revenue you're bringing into that practice, because an investor is going to look at that and say, this is a very risky asset. If it even is an asset to buy, because one person is generating 95% of revenue, or one person is generating 60% of revenue, even, like, that's pretty high. So thinking about, and obviously this is not something that can be done overnight, building a team and diversifying your service mix, but there are things that people should be thinking about for the future as they continue operating and growing and scaling their businesses. What can I do to build my team? What can I do to minimize the amount of revenue production I'm bringing into the business if I'm the owner and sole or main generator of revenue? I mean, the majority of injector owners are typically generating the majority of revenue themselves. Not everybody, but a lot of them. And then some other things to think about are, even on the wellness side, and obviously, GLP-1s have really totally disrupted the industry, but a lot of people don't realize that GLP-1s are, if you have like more than 10% of revenue coming from GLP-1 medications, that's actually a huge risk to a buyer. So so people think, oh, I was speaking at the Global Aesthetics Conference back in November, and I was talking about this, and I had someone literally get up in the room and shout at me saying, what are you talking about? I'm bringing in $600K in GLP-1 revenue. Like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, I mean, I can handle this stuff. I don't care if people yell at me, but he was very disgruntled. And it's because when you think about, the FDA, the legality, shortages, like, it's just not considered a valuable revenue stream. So even when we do financial analyses, we typically pull GLP-1 revenue out. If it's
but longevity. You've got to look at, like, at a certain point, how long are they a patient for on the GLP-1? Because it does act pretty quickly. Then they go, oh, I'm good. You have to, but it has to be integrated into a longer treatment plan.
Mm-hmm.
Where at post GLP-1, we've got a full treatment plan that includes this as a chapter in the book. But it can't be the sole, like, you have solely GLP-1 customers, much like the injectables. When you're only doing that, I'm like, well, you got a decent margin on it. Maybe the injectables lower margin, but you have to be looking at customer lifetime value. That is not a lifetime value centric offer.
Yeah. The way people should be thinking about it too with GLP-1s, not saying that people shouldn't have GLP-1s. I think that they're an incredible thing to have in your practice, but you just need to be thinking about it is, what other ancillary services can I plug into my GLP-1 patients? So if GLP-1 got taken out, these patients are still consuming all of these other treatments and services in my practice.
Bingo. It might be the gateway. It might be the gateway to get patients in the door.
Yeah.
But it has to be used that way. And then to the point of, like, the gentleman who said, like, I'll make $600,000 a year doing this. I go, that needs to be a small portion of, I hope you're doing $7 million a year.
Yes, exactly.
I hope you're doing this, because, and that's great for you, but, like, I hope that, because otherwise you're kind of standing on thinner sticks, because if that, look how fast it came in, as fast as it comes, it can go. Technology changes, lifestyles changed, habits change. And so if you're hinging on even one revenue stream too much, or one channel too much, even if it's not GLP-1s, even if you're just like, almost everything is this laser, what if it breaks? Like, something can happen. What if your laser tech quits? So you really have to have a little bit of leverage on a mix of stuff, but an intentional mix of, do I understand how these serve my overall bottom line and the longevity of these services and the lifetime value? Otherwise, it's vanity metrics that are fooling you. And that's the problem, is that everyone's just looking at ironically, in an aesthetics industry, but everyone's just looking at the surface level. And I'm like, but underneath that, there might be a lot going on. They're just really good at covering it up,
Definitely. Body sculpting is another thing too. Like, body sculpting devices have just been going down. And so, that's something else that we typically view as a risky service line, is if someone has like 50% of their revenue coming from M-Sculpt and Cool Sculpting, like that's also considered a risky line. So thinking of just the patient as a more 360 holistic approach, and really building comprehensive treatment plans that are higher cost. And so it's more so you're not treating every patient or prospective patient that comes in your practice. It's really a quality over quantity thing because it's not a volume game. It's a lifetime value game, 100%.
It is, but it's also in the service of the patient, right? So you can't just be selling to sell. This is medicine at the end of the day. You have to be understanding the person's problems, intentions, goals, and say, this is the path to get there fully, not just the next chapter, but here's where we want to get you to at the finish line. And then the other part of that too, and I realize this is kind of conflicting to a listener, right? Because you might be thinking, wait, my opinion is, and what you kind of just conveyed is a bit of diversification of services so that you're not overly, hinging on one particular service to drive the practice, especially one that is very fad based or, you know what I mean? Like maybe not as sustainable long term. But the other part of it is that you don't want to have too many different services and say yes to every little flavor of service you can do and using up all these rooms with giant saunas and cryo and IV drips and God knows what. You have to understand the optimization of your space and the facility cost where your at the end of the day, like this whole episode is know your margins because you have to know where to put those things because like, Shannon and Audrey just said we shouldn't overly hinge on one type of service. So let's go buy all the stuff. Let's go make a room for cryo. God help me. Like it's just so big. And then like
let's put the giant thing in one room.
Giant thing in one whole room and let's go. And it can't be used for anything else because it takes up half the dang room and use up all the electricity. But like let's go do that and then hope, right? That's it's diversity of services. Well, no, you have to make sure that it's part of all the treatment plans, that it serves your customer, all those things, right? So it's a little bit contradictory at times when I say that because I'm like diversify but with intention. Like know your optimal mix of your services. And I honestly say, we do this with our customers too, is we say track your goals of revenue by service line. So like your revenue goal should not be like 3 million in general. And I go, yeah, but it's deceptive. Because if it's mostly from like GLP-1s, I'd be like, not a good
it's
3
skewed.
million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like you want to have a certain amount, certain amount from retail, certain amount from the GLP-1, certain amount from laser and so on, surgery, if you're doing surgery. You have to balance that out so that it's a good, healthy 3 million.
Yes. I 100% agree.
Yeah. It's what we always see. I feel like it's the same stuff. I mean, you've been to a lot of these conferences too, and a lot of this content, I've heard your content before as well and heard you speak. And I go, how many times do they have to hear this? I feel like the messaging is always the same. Like I always say the same message. I see the same message at every conference. It's consistent. I go, y'all should be as consistent with your patients as we are talking to you. But we say the same thing over and over again. Yeah. It's the proverbial business equivalent of wear your sunscreen, right? It's a lot of the same stuff over and over again, admittedly. And I said, because it's true. It's kind of reassuring. But like, talk to me a little bit about that. Like, why do you think why are we still in this position, kind of repeating these things? And I feel like everyone's heard these things before. I mean, I've said it a bajillion times, everything we talked about today,
And that's a tough question to answer because I will say, I think it's from this aspect. And it's funny you said that because I will be, and I've been in this industry for over a decade, like I'll be speaking on, let's say even the same topic a year later at the same event. And I see some of the same people in the room from last year.
Taking the same notes.
Yes, exactly. And so I think what it really is it breaks down into a deficiency of knowledge or a deficiency of execution. And the majority of people, whenever you go to an event and you're learning about XYZ topic, whatever it is, and people get very, they're all excited about it. They go back to their practice Monday morning and then they do nothing. And so it's truly never it's very few of the times is it a deficiency of knowledge of why somebody doesn't do something that they're supposed to do. It's typically they know what to do. They have the knowledge to go do it, but they don't execute on it. So I think it's just a lack of execution. The knowledge is there if people continually are, consuming this information and immersing themselves in the, there's so many amazing conferences and things like this in this industry. And then they just go back to their business. They get bogged down in their list of priorities. And then the things that they were supposed to do, that they were supposed to execute on, slowly fall off of that list. And then they find themselves a year later in the same spot.
Yeah, I think the theme overall is the urgent overtakes the important.
Yeah. Yep. 100%.
The same exact thing you said before. Audrey, we could chat about this all day, but I know we've got to wrap things up. So I want to say thank you for hopping on the podcast today. Would you please tell our listeners how they can learn more about Aviva? Tell me about how they can get in touch with you or learn more from you through your content.
Of course, of course. So if anyone's interested in learning more about Aviva Aesthetics, and we typically look at practices that are doing 1.5 million and up, if anyone's interested in learning more about how we can help you optimize EBITDA before a sale at a much higher multiple down the road, you can definitely go to our website, avivaesthetics.com. My email is aneff@avivaesthetics.com. I'm more than happy to respond to anyone and everyone. So feel free to shoot me a note or a message or an email. And then where you can find me, I do have an industry podcast. We should do an episode, Shannon, on my podcast and do a little podcast swap. It's called True to Form. I launched it, I think about 6 or 7 years ago. It's something I love podcasting because you just get to learn from other people. So it's been a resource for me, certainly as well. And then Instagram and LinkedIn are my two platforms of choice for social media. So you can just search my name and you'll find me. And it was an honor and a pleasure to have this conversation with you, Shannon.
Yeah, same. Guys, check out her content. It's really good. Not kidding. So go down to the show notes, go grab all the links that Audrey just mentioned. And again, thank you for hopping on today. Really appreciate it.
Of course. It was a pleasure.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If it left you feeling inspired to take action, make sure to check out our free video series that walks you through the same framework that we use as a CFO team to identify what's holding a practice back from growth and how to fix it. Links in the show notes. See you on the next episode.